Every person in this room who described failure described it for the following reasons. And I gave all the reasons: time, money, network we don't have, people we don't have, not the right management, not the right people, right? We don't have the resource. And they went through this whole thing. I said, what all these things, not of Supreme Court justices, what they all have in common is you're all saying we didn't have the resources to succeed. Money is a resource. Time is a resource. Technology is a resource. People is a resource. Experience is a resource. Supreme Court justices are so many resources, right? And they all agreed. I said, here's the only problem. I said, in my experience, and you correct me if you're wrong, and I want an honest answer. When we get out of ourselves and we look at human beings and their ability to succeed or fail, how many people you've ever met who did not have the resources and they beat somebody who had all the resources? I said, resources, when you look at the most powerful and effective people in history, were never the problem. They didn't have the resources, but they got them. How do people get resources when they don't have them? The answer is they're resourceful. The ultimate resource is resourcefulness. That's what makes someone successful. And here's what's great about resourcefulness. Who has it within them? Who? Who? Every human being, but the question is whether you access it or not. Now, strategic innovation is different than just constant, never-ending improvement. Constant, never-ending improvement is a very, very important principle. If you're not constantly improving, you're definitely going to be passed up by your competition. But if you're thinking about strategic innovation, what it really means to me is rewriting the rules for competition within an industry, within an area. When you change how people compete, when you change the rules, you take over that industry. You shift completely the game. So in my industry, the vast majority of people spoke and still do for 1 to 3 hours, which many of you yesterday wish I was one of those people. But that's usually it, because what it was is about inspiration, right? It's inspire people. And what happened for me is 90% of them are an hour or 90 minutes. And I was like, it's wonderful. That's a useful tool. But, inspiration is like motivation. Motivation's nice, and it's like a bath. It doesn't last, but you still take a bath every day. But my view was, how do I get people into immersion? How do I put people in an experience where their life really changes? And so I changed the game, and people never even considered saying, we're going to do 3 or 4 days and nights where you're going to go 50 hours. No one will sit there. They won't sit for a 3-hour movie that someone spent $200 million on. But I changed the game. I changed the rules, because once people got the result, even if in the beginning it was tough on them, by the end, the level of transformation was so huge, it changed the rules, it changed the game, it changed the size, it gave me a brand, it let me dominate an industry. Because when people walk up to me throughout my life, the number one phrase, you can see me anywhere in the world, dozen times a day, not in a seminar, just walking around, is, oh my God, Tony Robbins, you changed my life. It's like, I always say, you changed, but thanks for the credit, I'm glad I helped. But they'll say that like clockwork, every single time. That's different than I like your product. That's different than I enjoyed your seminar. You changed my life. That changes the rules for competition. That created a different way of competing. Now, I didn't do it to compete. I did it because my passion was I love people, and I don't want them just to be inspired for the moment. I want to make sure they really have the tools, the skills, the ability, the shift that creates a lasting change in their life. And I wouldn't settle for anything less. So you don't have to do it to compete. You strategically innovate because you're obsessed with meeting the needs of your clients. Is it the single most important skill in life? We hate the word selling, so I'll give you a word that it really is that doesn't have the negative connotation. It's the word that all leaders have. What would that word be? Influence. What changes companies is leaders. The only way to change a company is leadership. If I want to change a company that I own and I want to make a shift in that company, the number one thing I'm going to do is shifting leadership. That might be taking leaders to a different level. That might bring new leaders in. That might be new leaders of new voices, with new perspectives, with new skill sets, new directions. But we need to take things to another level. Leaders solve problems, and leaders maximize resources. If you're going to solve problems, you can't do it yourself, or it would have already been solved. You have to get others to help you to do it. That requires influence. True? If you're going to get people to maximize resources, that requires influence. If you're going to get people to partner with you, provide you resources, capital, suppliers, anything, that requires influence. If you're going to have an impact on your kids or your community or the world, That requires influence. There is no more important skill of leadership than influence. And yet most of us think of it like selling, and as a result, we don't master influence. So I'm not here today to try and get you to become a master of influence in 45 minutes or so. Am I chatting with you here because we have so many of the speakers. This is the area of life I am most focused on. Because I know that if you can't influence, you can't lead. But if you can influence powerfully, intelligently, with integrity, there's no limit to whatever you can envision and what you can make real. And if your influence becomes not just you as the influence, but you're able to influence systems, people, company, culture. If you can turn other people into influencers, now whatever you vision about can be made into reality. And so as a skill of influence, we got to ask ourselves, how many agree leaders are what change companies? Raise your hand if you agree with that, say aye. And leaders' number one skill is influence. If you agree, say aye. And then the question becomes, how do you influence? If I can be part of what helps you, but you do the major work or you make the final thing, you're going to own it more. So what I would do with people is I'd say, simple, here's your problem. I want you to write down what the problem is and describe it in 2 sentences max. This is your memo. 2 sentences, crystal clear that anybody will understand it. If you have to write more than 2 sentences, you have to tell them a paragraph, the question doesn't work. It has to be maximum of 2 sentences, ideally 1, so crystal clear, anybody can understand it. That's number 1. So you write that down. You write down, define the problem with precision. Describe the problem or the request. And sometimes it's not a problem, sometimes it's a request. Can we turn the air conditioning up? Can we turn it down? Can we have lunch at whatever time? Can we do this? Can we do that? Whatever the request may be. So you write it down. Then the second thing I have them do is describe 3 solutions to their request or problems. 3, and I use keywords, 3 cost-effective, intelligent, viable solutions. Might be viable, time viable, resource viable, whatever the case may be, viability. So what are 3 intelligent, practical, viable solutions that you believe we can implement, to solve this or to meet this need? By the way, why do I have them come up with 3? Someone tell me why. 1 choice is no choice. 2 choices is a dilemma. Until you have 3 choices, you're not at choice. That's my rule in life. You may not like all the choices. Whenever you think you have 1 choice is no choice. If you got 2, you're in a dilemma. There's always at least 3 choices. Plus, I'm making that person become a problem solver. If I solve the problem, they'll just have a new problem for me to solve. But if I can teach them to be a problem solver, the game changes. How many follow? Now, sometimes this is less efficient, but with a mass audience, it was very efficient. And then they turn that in, and then I have a choice. I could now respond back by saying, circle, I accept your request, or I think solve the problem, we'll do it with your number 1. Or I could modify it, I'm willing to do that, but I think we need to do this and this is the way to do it. Or I could reject it and tell them why. And then we'd have this communication. It was very efficient. This is very different than, tell me what you think we should do in a suggestion box. So now, tell us your question and then tell us at least 3 answers.